Welcome to season 2 of THEOS Cybernova, and in this episode we're revisiting conversations with Nigel Phair. So, Nigel, how are you doing these days?
I'm great, thanks, Paul. How are you?
Yeah, doing all right, thanks. Doing all right, and great to be chatting again. I really enjoyed the podcast we had in the first season, and yeah, you're one of my few guests who isn't tied down with compliance in big companies, so you could shoot from the hip. You can say it as it is, right?
Well, it's certainly my preference. So, hence why I don't work in big corporate or vendor land.
Well, it's great to have you on the show again. And I'm going to start with a bit of a zinger because we're going to talk today about cyber scams, cyber fraud, which I know is close to your heart in your research and the work that you do with your partners, etc. Um, but the numbers are pretty shocking, and I'll talk about the numbers in a moment. But why is law enforcement still behind the curve in fighting cyber scams? They've been around for a long time, but they're just increasing constantly. Why is it they're just not handling this, tackling it?
I think there's a really simple answer to that, Paul, and that's from everyone from the police commissioner down doesn't understand the impact on society of the dollar losses. They don't understand what needs to be undertaken to do these investigations. Sometimes they're complex and sometimes they're not. And I think we're just still set in this terrestrial crime world where if they can see it, they can police it.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. That's pretty tough words. I mean, just for the audience who don't know us, we're both ex-cops, so we do come from a law enforcement background, and it's a tough one because I sense that modern policing is metrics driven, right? And a lot of these cyber scams, of course, they're not because cyber is the internet, right? So of course, it's not your local scammer; it's your scammer overseas, and therefore arrests are unlikely in your local neighborhood. So your policing metrics of successful arrests aren't going to look good if you just focus on cyber scams, right?
Well, I think there's that. I think there's a range of different things. So, when you look at technology risk, it's both what I call it, a horizontal and a vertical. So it's the same crime type. And, all mature policing agencies have all got cyber crime investigative units now of varying degrees and abilities. But, there's still the people that are over there and they're still not fully resourced and they're still not fully brought in. But when you think back to our policing days, what we used to call computer forensics,
Mm.
now you'd probably call it DFIR and broader. That's the horizontal where every crime type has a digital component to it. Every crook's got a mobile device. There's or using social media or doing using crypto to receive money or a range of other things. So I also don't fully see technology used in the investigation of all crimes to the level it has to. But I still go back to my point, and you said it with if you can see it. I think police ministers, police commissioners down, they look at what's on the front page. They still look at newspapers, even though sort of, subsequent generations don't. And they are focused on things like outlaw motorcycle gangs and drugs and other super important crime types. And they say to their police, get another car out and solve this problem. So they do.
Yeah, interesting comments there. And you're right about resources because it's a challenge in our company and in any other company getting the right resources. There's always this talk about a shortage of cyber talent. The reality is, I think it's a shortage of the right cyber talent because there's cyber talent and there's cyber talent. There's ones who have experience and know what they're doing and also have the mindset to be able to unravel complex, in a policing context anyway, complex scenarios, right?
Well, without wanting to go off on our first tangent,
Which we are already, yeah.
a couple of minutes in, the skills debate is an important one to have and a shocking debate going on at the moment. Yeah, in Australia, the numbers are bandied about between 30,000 and however many tens of thousands more people are there. And you're 100% right. There aren't those vacancies. It's just not true. And
Mm.
I think we're telling particularly our young undergraduates at university, the wrong story because they're going off and doing a Bachelor of Cybersecurity or a Bachelor of IT or a Bachelor of Software Engineering or something, thinking that rivers of gold are going to come from it. And those jobs just aren't there.
Mm.
They're there if you've got genuine experience and long-standing experience, and you can command a reasonable salary. Though I think salaries will start dropping. Um, that's one thing, but also I think we need to better quantify what we want in a graduate coming out of university or out of the polytechnic sector or anything. And this is where we need to have a better skills discussion and a better skills debate about saying, you run a business and you need certain people to do certain things. Um, but universities really aren't, I don't believe, explaining to the job market what you are buying when you have this person that's just done a 3-year bachelor of, etc.
Right.
And then I think coupled with that, cyber, you and I have been probably doing cyber for some of the longest in and around it, and it's still really nascent. If I'd done an accounting degree, I'd go and get a job, whether it's with a big four or some local accounting firm. They'd go, "Yeah, okay, you've done your bachelor, you don't really know much. We're going to put you through your professional year. We're going to teach you all these things, and everything's going to be great." Same with engineering, same with law, et cetera, et cetera. Cyber, I don't believe is good at getting that young person. And when I say young, I mean young in their career. It doesn't matter their age,
Yep. Yep.
and actually bringing them along.
This is fascinating stuff, and it's you're right. We've gone down a rabbit hole, but let's stay in this rabbit hole because it's an interesting it's an interesting segue, right? We also got to bring AI into this equation as well. But before I discuss AI in this context, um, you're right about a career path, if you like, for cyber juniors. Let's call them.
Hmm.
They may be young or old, right, or junior to the field. And the challenge we've got, though, I think, is that accounting and law, the examples you mentioned, engineering, they're pretty rigid. They're pretty well defined. They don't change that much, right? Cyber is just constantly evolving and changing. So, how do you set a standard, approach to developing new talent and, getting them to that experience level where they actually become really productive and useful?
Yeah, that is the hard part. So we have frameworks. You have the nice framework, for example, and you have the other one's gone out of the back of my head. It'll come to me. You've got some job ready frameworks
Yep.
that can be used, but explaining to people the breadth of a career in cyber, I think, is the first thing, because there's technical, heavily deep dive technical careers at one end, and at the other end you've got, let's call it GRC and other things where there isn't. It's more project management, for example, and everything in the middle. And a lot of people say to me, "Do I need to learn?" I'm put off by getting a career in cyber because I don't know how to code and I don't want to know how to code. And my response normally to that is, you don't necessarily need to know how to code, but you need to understand what code does.
Yes.
And I think that's where we need to bring people along this journey of mentorship throughout their career, is just explaining some of these principles. And through Monash University, I supervise students doing their integrated workplace learning for a semester. And often they'll start off wanting to do something and they'll finish their semester long placement full time thinking their career is going in a completely different area. That is 9 times out of 10. And I think it's great because I've had a taste of actually what it is.
Right.
So, there's lots of graduates being put through. Universities are great. I think, as I said, I think we've got to, as a sector, better explain what industry is buying. But I'm a big fan of the polytechnic side of the house, of being hands on. There's nothing like getting your hands dirty, and whether it includes coding, whether it includes provisioning accounts to people, all those sorts of things. How you learn that sort of stuff along the way. And then there's all sorts of other careers along the way, which I think we need to better promote.
I think you're right, and look, you're in a rare position, working in the university where you've actually done the hard yards. You've been in the trenches, etc. But a lot of the academia don't understand the real world. If I'm not being too insulting to them, I hope not. But
Not involving at all. It's the reality. You know, and that would be a good thing if we could get our career academics
mm,
into industry.
yeah. But the problem is salaries and stuff like that. It's very hard for somebody who's earning a big salary out in the corporate world, to give that up to become a mentor and a coach to aspiring newcomers.
Yeah, I see pockets of Europe that do it better, particularly if I just put the Australia hat on, about getting sort of your serious industry people with adjunct positions and getting them in the tent in universities. And unfortunately, when I see it in Australia, the motivation is more to can we get some money out of you to do a research grant?
Yeah.
Rather than we want to integrate you into this and get your learnings. It's moving past the come and do a guest lecture scenario. Yeah, that's dime a dozen.
I get you. So I've got to get back onto scams, right? But before I do, let's.
We actually never got onto scams, to be fair.
To be fair, we didn't really, did we? We just talked about why police weren't really handling it well. But it does lead into this important topic because you need capacity if we're going to defeat scammers, right? We need the capabilities and we need collaboration and we need capacity. So it is important to just cover this. And AI is the big elephant in the room, right? So why? I mean, well, let's start first of all by saying that we had an interesting discussion here in the office at THEOS Cyber about AI taking over junior roles in our line of business. So where most people, and I'm talking about cyber rather than investigations, where most people in cyber get experience or start their experiences in the SOC, right?
Yep,
And
yep,
SOC
yep. Eyes
analysts,
on glass.
we are heading headlong into a world where our SOC analysts are going to be machines. They're basically going to be
Yep,
AI,
yep.
and with a few
Particularly
more
level one.
experienced ones. Yeah, with a few more experienced ones to QA and etc. But those experienced ones will want to move up into the world, be a CISO or whatever. So then who fills that gap? Because then you haven't got the people coming through in the pipeline. And I see worrying times a little bit ahead. And I see the same in other, I'm just highlighting the SOC because it's easier to kind of explain, but there's many other areas of cyber investigations, technology investigations, and or response and or security, where AI is going to be taking over those junior level jobs and not feeding the experience and talent that we need to run at a higher level. Do you agree?
I semi agree. I live by the expression of I don't think AI will take over all the roles. I think someone using AI will take over all the roles.
Yes, but again, playing
So there will definitely be a reduction in headcount. That's a no-brainer. But you're still going to need someone to manage the AI. And I still prefer using the term machine learning, by the way, rather than AI.
fair enough. Let's not go down that rabbit hole though. But
That's season 3, isn't it?
that's season 3, yeah. So no, but what I'm saying is that yes, I agree. You've got to have that person using AI, but they can't just be good at AI. They've also got to have experience because they've got to understand whether
Absolutely.
AI is making mistakes or whether they're and that therefore is how do you get those people with the experience if AI is taking over the very junior roles, in my opinion.
Well,
That's all I'm saying on that.
yeah, no, I think there's a number of issues around that. I think higher education is still reticent about the use of AI because it's always seen as someone's going to cheat on their exam. They're going to go to Chat GPT and say, "Write me 3,000 words on, you know, endpoint detection,"
Mm.
or whatever the assignment is. And so there's sort of that a bit of a freight. I think corporates, and I was reading an article, some of them are starting to block some of the mainstream LLMs, which means we've been talking about shadow IT for a very, very, very long time. We're just going to end up with shadow AI in the workplace. So that's not going to serve us any good with people learning things because you've got to be playing with this. And you know, I quite enjoy talking to company directors and more importantly to risk and audit committees. And one of the questions I ask these people in the committees when they sort of say, "Oh, everyone wants to do something AI, because it's cool," and I sort of say to them, are you individually playing with these LLMs? Are you just, putting in basic things like, "I'm going away for the weekend. What should I do in country, city X?" And most of them just aren't even just fiddling just to work out what it is, or managing their calendar, or doing all these other sorts of things, or better scripting email responses, and we're at the very edge of this sort of stuff. And I feel like saying to them, how do you propose to be the custodians of your organizations from a non-executive perspective if you're not even having a go yourself, and you're making management making arbitrary decisions about people in the workplace using some of these tools? And so I fear things aren't looking good.
You're bringing the whole vibe down here, Nigel. But yeah,
But
you're
we
absolutely
haven't even
right.
got on the scams yet.
No, let's get on to scams now. Okay, yeah, let's get back on track finally. So what the reason this was triggered because when I reached out to you our last little chat, you mentioned that you were heading off to Singapore and to Korea, and part of that is to attend a anti-scam, whatever it was,
Mhm.
conference, right? Could you tell us a little more, firstly, about those conferences, the scam one?
Sure, sure. So the Global Anti-Scam Alliance is holding their Singapore, their Asia conference. So I'll be attending that, and there's some interesting sessions, interesting people. To give it the gravitas, it's actually sold out in person. It's at Suntec, and Suntec holds a
Wow.
lot of people in
Yep.
various rooms, and they've opened it up online to people. So kudos to them for getting a whole range of. It's predominantly an industry sort of audience. So that's all good. So it'll be interesting with that. And then the Korea bit is the um, Cybersecurity Korea 2025 conference, which is a government-run event, invite only, which I'm hoping will be quite interesting. And I first went to Korea when I was in the police back in 2003 or four, back when there were streets ahead of us with connectivity and a whole range of other things. I remember I
Yes.
remember going there and going to a hotel and had 2 megabits per second Wi-Fi in the hotel, and we were at dial-up in 2004.
Yes. Yeah. You've moved on from dial-up now in Australia, right?
I think so.
No, just kidding. Yeah, but so let's obviously the conference in Singapore triggered my interest, where and I thought I'd focus this talk on scams, which I failed to do so far. But what are the sort of common or innovative scams that you've been seeing recently? Because I know you look at this very closely, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I like reading a lot of stats, and we
Mm,
take stats as they are, which is an important issue to first talking with, because every jurisdiction is sort of now putting out that we've lost this amount of money in scams.
mm,
And I think the first thing to delineate out of that is that figure is never true. That's what the reported amount is. No one, in Australia included, Singapore, pretty much every other jurisdiction, is guessing how much underreported scams are. So going back to the why police aren't doing this, the figures are horrendous as it is, in how many
yes.
billions of dollars are lost, and yet it's still underreported. If it was any other crime type, if it was, we go back to, I remember my early policing days in the late 80s, 90s, everything was about drugs. Fraud wasn't a thing, but drugs. And we used to high five ourselves when we'd sort of seized 10 kilos of cocaine, and that wasn't even a drop in the ocean. And the resourcing that went into drug interdiction, particularly at the border, still does today, which is great. I applaud the police for that. And it's still a drop in the ocean. But the poor old cyber people, it's talked a big game for them, but they're not getting that resourcing. So until we accurately understand the losses, that's the first thing. And then we've got to move on from talking about the dollar losses to the whole of sort of societal losses. So someone loses X amount of money. To some people, it's their whole life savings. To some people, it's the equivalent of a bad day at the races. It all depends where you sit on the curve of wealth and your own risk. Some people falling for a scam, they just go, it was a risky decision, and I took it because I make risky decisions. And sometimes they pay off, and sometimes they don't. So we've got to understand more the length and breadth of what it means to people financially, then what it means to them psychology, because to some people, it really is the end of the world. And we don't, I think, address that sufficiently, nor give the tools and techniques to people to deal with this huge financial loss from a psychological perspective.
Right. I'm going to ask you another question related to because the psychological part is really important, and I definitely feel for these victims.
Mhm.
A lot of people say, "Oh, you're so stupid," how could you fall for that? But that's that's really insensitive in many ways, because these scams are actually very clever and very they they um, leverage the insecurities of individuals. They learn how to press the right buttons, to get them, on the hook with their scams. And that's the, that's the hard part, really. And so I've obviously, ex Hong Kong police, and I assist clients and friends, or whoever, to understand how to navigate reporting to police and what the outcomes might be. And I have to say that I'm often very realistic with them to say that, look, the chances of getting your money back are, well, zero,
Pretty
probably.
much zero.
Yeah. And, yes, going to law enforcement gives some closure and, it may, but the reality is, are these guys ever going to get arrested or, unless it's for insurance reasons or other, reasons, then yeah, you're not going to get much help from law enforcement. And I can help navigate that. But the reality is also that law enforcement, I don't think, are very sensitive to the emotional damage because very often they want to report it because they hope that not so much about getting the money back, but getting somebody convicted for this, getting them punished,
Hmm.
or and getting that sense of justice. I would say for it. So
So,
I guess that's the same sense in Australia, right?
so you raise a really important point. It goes back to the very first question you asked about why isn't law enforcement doing sufficient? With any other crime, you go to the police station and you report the crime. You walk in, go to the front desk, and you say, "This is what's happened to me. My car got stolen, or got damaged, or my wallet got stolen, or whatever happened. I got assaulted. It doesn't matter what it is." And the young constable on duty will take a report. But we don't do that with any online crime. You're directed to a website. It's very hard to find the website. It's very hard to navigate the website. And the website asks you to do certain things. So, firstly, you've just had a really bad online experience, and now you're being directed to do something online to report it.
Mm.
And then on top of that, it's expected that you know what's happened. For a lot of people, all they know is they had some sort of interaction, and now they have less money in their bank, and something happened in the middle. They may or may not be able to explain it plausibly. And so I just think at every little factor point that we're not being victim centric.
I 100.
Whereas we've learned that with so many other things, with domestic violence and
Yeah.
sexual assaults and all these other things, we've learned to be victim centric. So it's not like we need to learn this stuff. We know, and we've been doing that sort of stuff,
Yes.
you know.
And you're right. There's still a prevailing attitude, in my opinion, when you talk to people that how could they be so dumb to fall for this? And that's hurtful, and it's certainly
Well,
not helping. Yeah.
the messaging is really another thing to really talk about. Is we victim blame and we victim shame. As you say, it's like how could you have done this? What's wrong with you? And we say things, and when we say this in our national education, we say things like, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. What does that mean?
I know,
Everyone
right?
I know that I've spoken to that's fallen for a scam didn't think it was too good to be true. That's why they went along with it. And so, saying to them afterwards, if it seems to be good to be true, and we say things like, "Don't click on links." I click on links all the time. I get sent emails with links, generally legitimate, but we just can't make these blanket statements saying, "Do not click on links." I send emails with links in them all the time. I hyperlink all sorts of things through emails.
Right.
So our messaging is just way out of whack. The way we treat people. It's the same when, with people within an organization. You'll often hear all the vendors say people are the weakest link. That's why you need to buy my insert product here. And until we start splitting that around and celebrating people saying, you know what, there's all this technology out there to try and stop this, but you are still the final solution, and we celebrate you for that. We're going to give you all the tools and techniques and the support that we can. We're never going to solve this.
No, and you're right, and it's a pressing issue. I just pulled up AI, funnily enough, and asked about statistics on cyber scams in the areas that we focus on anyway with this podcast, such as Hong Kong, and Singapore, Philippines, places like this. And I just saw that Hong Kong is quadrupled in 5 years the number of cases and the financial losses to over 5.5 billion Hong Kong dollars. It's shocking numbers. And as I
Well,
flick through Singapore and Philippines, it's consistent, right? They're all rising exponentially.
Singapore is number one for scams in Southeast Asia, twice that of its next one, which is Malaysia. And if what do you do if you're a cyber criminal and you're into scams? You go to the rich jurisdictions where the people have got the money, and that's they're running businesses.
Yeah, that's the
So that
reality.
is, but where the extension to this goes to, Paul, which why national governments do some stuff, but don't do anywhere near enough policing at all the arms of government. So we celebrate this. We see in the news, we see these statistics come out quarterly or annually. We see it in the news, we do press releases, we celebrate it was this X amount loss. I can't believe we celebrate that in any way, shape, or form as though it's a headline figuring, oh, it was one crime reported every 7 minutes. Now it's one crime reported every 5 minutes. It's like, we're telling people this as though it's a thing. You know, Going back to the AI discussion, we want people online. We want people getting the goodness out of technology. It's where productivity is going to come in society. And to me, the best way to get people to become non-technology adopters is for them to suffer one or more scams. Just go, you know what? I'm not going to participate in this. I'm going back to the bank and I'm going to queue up in front of the teller. I'm not going to get on, I'm not going to enjoy social media and be in contact with my friends and family. I'm not going to do all these sorts of things.
Mm.
And that's where I don't think strategically as a nation or nations, we are fully understanding what this means.
Agree. I think what everybody needs is a little AI bot in the background, isn't it, on your laptop or your phone, right? That's monitoring all your websites, your emails, your WhatsApps or text messages, and saying, that one's a scam. That one's a scam," you know.
Look, I'm sure there's vendors creating that sort of stuff. And look, there is some cool stuff done. The telcos in Australia are blocking hundreds and hundreds of thousands of text messages and calls a month. Sometimes I get a call, so I won't answer my phone unless the caller is in my contacts list.
Mm,
And sometimes you'll get one that'll have that little triangle alert saying this is we think this is a scam call.
yes,
There's intent and there's things happening. It's just
definitely.
not at scale. We seem to, particularly in Australia, we seem to have lots of good coordination, which is great. But coordination ain't stopping the scams.
No, you're right. You're right. And yeah, and I think the lack of law enforcement, or the lack of effectiveness, I should say, of law enforcement, is creating a somewhat vigilante approach, right,
Mm.
to cyber scams. I find it quite intriguing. You see on YouTube videos of very smart people who basically mess with scammers or hack them back, and embarrass them, etc., or just waste their time or expose them publicly, whatever it might be. Or these AI bots designed to just represent grannies or, or elder people. Um,
So the banks in Australia are using that.
okay, I saw it originated in the UK. I think one of the banks there started that one off.
Yeah, yeah. No, I can't. One of the big four. I'm not. I think it's Commonwealth Bank.
Mm,
Have been in the media a fair bit, actively doing this to soak up the time of the cyber
yes.
criminals.
Yeah, the theory being the more time that they spend with a bot, the less time they can spend with a real
Yeah.
human. And, well, I mean, we have to support initiatives like this because clearly the traditional law enforcement solution isn't working. So, but I find this quite fascinating, and I do enjoy seeing, folks who will give up their time to develop these solutions to hopefully save a few more people from being hit by the scammers, right?
Yeah, well, there's been a discussion in Australia for at least 15 years about what they call a cyber reserve, and it particularly do with defence. Like, so you have your army reserve. If something happens, they get called up for things. Doing the same thing for cyber, and some people take that extension to this, saying if you're retired and you've got a couple of hours spare on a Tuesday morning, why not occupy, a scammer so that they're not, those couple of hours isn't being put to productive use by them.
Could you ever see the Australian government doing that?
Probably a bridge too far. But then, having said that, where I live in Canberra, if you've got dash cam, you see, and your dash cam, you're driving along and someone cuts in front of you and runs a red light, you can send that to the police, and
Mm.
they'll send a ticket, an enforcement ticket to that person. So we have vigilanteism already in other crime types.
Oh, I bet some people really enjoy that, don't they? They look out for the.
And well, and this is the issue, isn't it? I think that's the real issue. Is some people might just enjoy it too much and wavering along, baiting people, and stepping over the line.
Yeah. Yeah, I could really picture some Aussies driving around endlessly, just looking for those moments. Maybe, maybe not, but yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? But again, we touched on education earlier, but is there any other things you think we could do better in education?
Well, there's no technical silver bullet.
Yeah.
Firstly, so really it comes back to education. I'm not saying it's all we've got, but it's predominantly what we've got. But as we know from the statistics, it's not working.
Yeah.
So we either need to change our education or do more of it, or both.
But as you know, we were talking earlier, and as you mentioned, it's nothing, the scams themselves, you don't need education to be constantly changing because the scams don't really change, do they? They at the
The, the,
core.
the vector is still telephones and text and WhatsApp.
Yes.
And I've always been a believer that they're the most trustworthy things, particularly for older citizens that have grown up using a telephone. And so that when someone rings them, they say they're from the bank, you believe
Yes.
them because that's what used to happen. Or if you get a WhatsApp message from someone with this great investment opportunity, or someone that's just dramatically fallen in love with you, or whatever it might be, from a dating site. And so I think that they will continue to be the vectors because they're the most trustworthy going around, way more trustworthy than email, for
Mm,
example, and
right.
people are used to them. And it's a low cost entry for criminals, sim boxing and the like. So I just think, probably about the main trend that's really starting to come along is some of these criminals are executing faster. So once they get on the hook, for some of the big pig butchering scams, they've got people on the hook for weeks and months and stuff. But the other ones, they're executing really quick and getting money out of people really
Right.
quick.
And I guess the other trend that's continuing to rise is crypto scams, of course, because as as crypto gets more of a broad acceptance and more punters are investing, then of course the criminals go after the money where the money is, right? So,
Yeah, well, it's a no-brainer. But interesting, the stats are still holding strong that people are still paying scam people through traditional wire transfers.
okay, interesting.
Crypto is still like number four. It hasn't risen. There's been a lot of assumption that, crypto equals money laundering. It probably does, but the criminals are still making plenty of money from a traditional wire fraud. And I also believe that goes back to the why the telephone. It's a trusted method. It's what people understand. They're used to sending money to other people through an app. So
Right.
I think that's where that comes into it. But who knows where crypto is going to head legitimately when you've got things like central bank digital currencies. All the reserve and central banks around the world have written policy positions at some end of the, we're going to have a look at it till we're not going to touch it because monetary policy is okay, blah, blah, blah. Then you've got stable coins, which are pegged to, say, a US dollar or another strong fiat. So, and there's good reason why we should be looking at those things, particularly sending of money. If you've got a guest worker from the Pacific Islands picking fruit in Australia and they want to send money back, taking it somewhere between a 5 to 8% commission really affects the family back home. So if you can create some sort of stable coin scenario where there's virtually no commission, then
Yes.
we should be investigating that.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah, and I'm sure it'll be a hot topic at the conference you're going to be attending in Singapore because, yeah, no, I certainly, from my point of view, I do get a lot of inquiries around crypto fraud, crypto scams, crypto thefts, etc., and they tend to be larger amounts as well than perhaps some of the other frauds, which are more. Number game. It's more victims, more money, right?
Yeah,
With
yeah.
smaller amounts. So.
Well, again, low barrier to entry. I've thought about creating my own coin. Nigel coin's got a ring to it.
Sir Nigel Cohen.
That's right. I'll get online and get the URL for that afterwards.
Yeah, well, we've seen it. We've done with others whose names we won't mention, but no, it's certainly a very prevalent topic, and I'm also next week at a major conference talking about organized crime groups, etc., and certainly crypto there remains a very fast moving and topical subject on this in this area. So yeah, I think we've covered quite a lot there, and I think these conversations I have with you are really fascinating because we kind of with our similar backgrounds, etc. We would love to see more done against criminals, that are basically
Mhm.
hurting people and ruining livelihoods and basically cruel. It's a cruel crime. and it's not enough is being done about it. So hopefully, over time, though, we can continue going to these conferences and trying to work with law enforcement, our former colleagues, etc., and helping to continue the fight. But it's not easy, is it?
No, no, it's not, and we can't arrest our way out of the problem. That's the first thing to tell law enforcement.
Right.
Organized crime are very good. That's why they're serious and organized, and they generally don't get caught, whether they're on, ethnic based lines or crime type based lines, or whatever it might be. But putting sand in their gears, whether it's an AI bot that keeps these people, on the hook. When you're dealing, that's the low level. That's where you've got your places in, for example, Southeast Asia, where there's just people forced to do these things. So we've got lots of pain points, so we can hit all the way up to serious and organised crime, where and that's one thing I'll give kudos to Australian, particularly my old chop, the Australian Federal Police. They're getting much better at proceeds of crime. You'll see in the news when they do something, there'll be a lorry with 3 Ferraris on the back that they've seized, the house, the crypto, the 10 Rolexes, that type of thing. Chucking them in jail is important, and investigating these things and restitution is important, but getting the assets is also an area that needs a lot more effort put into it.
Well, good stuff. So you've kind of helped me finish off there on a reasonably positive note, which is not a bad thing. And I hope our audience, if you've enjoyed listening to this, that you'll hit the like or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to us on, because I think it helps to get these kind of important information out to a broader audience, and every little bit helps. But Nigel, as you know, I always conclude these talks by asking about music, and I've told you the reasons why before. But has there been any improvement in your musical taste since the last time we spoke? And what's on your turntable at the moment?
Well, probably not. So it's all about the algorithm, and so I quite like going through phases of 70s disco. And
Oh, you're a Boney M man.
well, yes, that comes up, but the algorithm seems to serve me a lot of hot chocolate. It's got a nice beat to it. It's easy to have it in the background. You can shimmer around to that type of music.
Oh, brilliant. Nigel, thank you so much for giving up time to join us today. Enjoy the conferences you're going to be attending, and I look forward to welcoming you back on season 3 in there sometime in the future, because these talks are fascinating. Thank you very
Lovely
much for
part of
joining
it,
us.
Paul, and safe travels to you too.